Howdy folks, my name is Lance90 and welcome to a quick tips video where I'm going to talk about the starting locations for Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead. These are just going to be quick tip videos for people looking to find very specific information about the game. I have more extended tutorial Let's Play series on my channel, so let's dive right into it. So for now, the only thing we're going to worry about is just looking at the scenarios here. So the Evacuee is the default start for the game. This starts you out as a survivor. The survivor starts with winter clothes as probably the biggest advantage that the survivor has. You start the game in early spring, very early spring, and it's very cold. So that's actually a fairly good advantage for the survivor. They also start with a pocket knife and a little bit of water. Survivor is very good for new starting players. There is a few things to keep in mind. One is the survivor's heavy winter coat is very encumbering, as is the winter boots. There are other things you can wear that are very warm that have way less encumbrance than those pieces of gear. And we'll talk about that in a later video. But all in all, the survivor is a great starting thing. It's what you should definitely do if you're still new to the game. It starts you in the evac shelter. The evac shelter has a lot of the things you'll need to start. They recently added lots of water and food into the evac shelters, so it's easier to survive in them for longer now. And there's all sorts of things you can tear apart in the evac shelters to get yourself started out. Next option here is all these challenges ones are extremely difficult. Even I would have a very hard time winning any of these. Fungal Infection is a newer one, I think. Probably one that's a little bit easier to deal with. I think finding antifungal medication is not too hard. Still have to make a beeline for some kind of pharmacy or a superstore or you might even be able to find one in a gas station or something. Finding antifungal medication is not too difficult, but this would still be very hard to do. It would certainly be easier than some of these other infections that you can start with. This one also starts you with the survivor. You can still pick from other professions as well. But the locations are limited to in-town scenarios, so anytime you're starting in town, it's going to be much more dangerous, because towns are completely overrun by zombies. The really bad day is the next option. This one basically has every problem that you can imagine happening at the same time to your character, so this one is incredibly difficult. You start as a tweaker, which is going to start you addicted to drugs. Probably not even very good gear. It's been a while since I've played a tweaker, but I'm sure you don't have winter coats or anything, which will make it very difficult in the start of spring. Once again, this character is limited to in-town starts, which again, you have to be careful with these because you're going to be in a town full of many zombies. But yes, you can see here in the scenario flags, you're infected. This means you have the zombie virus. Finding antibiotics to deal with the zombie virus is very hard to find. I definitely cannot recommend any start that makes you start with the zombie virus, because it's very hard to find the antibiotics for it. Drunk and sick, probably not as bad as some of the other things going on here, but certainly not helpful. Fire nearby means the building that you're in is burning down. No starting NPC means if you have static NPCs turned on, they're not going to be there to help you out, which can be helpful when these starts where you start in town. You can kind of just funnel zombies in to fight them, and you can make a getaway. Medieval Peasant. This one starts you out in the wilderness. Not too much is bad about starting in the wilderness. There's no buildings nearby, but it also means there's no zombies nearby, really. It can spawn you just really deep in the middle of nowhere, because these maps are randomly and procedurally generated and have nothing to find anywhere. Limits you to a churl, which is kind of like a peasant kind of thing. This one's more of a flavor thing. This one's probably not that hard. I'm surprised it starts you with 8, unless the churl is really bad. Let's take a look, actually. So if you want to see what a class does from one of these scenarios, you can select the challenge or whatever scenario it is. Press tab to get over to profession. You can see what they've got. Food handling is new. I wonder if that's cooking now. Foot rags, loincloth. Okay, so they're not wearing anything. That's the problem with this character. So they're going to have extreme problems with dying of cold right now. Challenge lab patient. It's going to limit you again to survivor, but there might be other options as well. Let's tab over and see what they are. Yes, this one will allow you to pick some cyborg and mutant options. Cyborgs, you'll have some CBMs, but they could just be broken. They might be good ones, they might be broke ones. Or actually, it says what you're going to get right here. That's pretty impressive, actually. So this is actually probably a very good one to pick, to be honest with you. The willing mutant has better skills, it appears, and is wearing more gear, whereas the unwilling mutant is just starting in a subject underwear. But as you can see, the better the class is, the more points it pulls away from your class. And that's the same thing with the scenarios. The more difficult the scenario is, the more points it gives you. That's why a lot of these up here are all worth 8, because they're pretty difficult. The bigger problem with doing lab patient here is it locks you in the lab. Labs are just these giant underground facilities. I don't even know if there's a way to get out of one of these locked ones. I think it's basically just a special game mode where you're just going to be stuck in the lab. The labs can have tons of like defense robots that are extremely hard to kill. It could have all sorts of super high level zombies roaming around in them. Lab staff looks like it's going to be pretty much the same thing, except instead of having the bionics and stuff and mutants, you're actually playing like security guards and medical technicians and things like that. Abandon starts you off in a hospital. I think it limits you to like survivor, patient, but you can also be a cyborg type as well. Hospital starts. Any start that puts you in a very large building is going to be near impossible to survive, and the hospital is one such location. Evacuee camp. This is probably literally impossible. I've tried to do this before by picking like a start where I get infinite points to put into my character. I still could not get through this. Migos are incredibly powerful, like alien crab creatures, and you really need like high level firearms to even kill Migos, and they even run away if you do kill them. So inside these Migo camps, they're full of them for one thing, but they're also extremely high temperature. They're like 200 plus degrees Fahrenheit, so your character will die incredibly quickly in these. Even if you're wearing like full firefighter gear, you'll overheat in these. So I don't think there's any way to survive this one. Island prison. I've actually done this one once on camera. It took like 10 tries before I was able to escape this island prison. It's just one of those things. Anything where you start in a very large building is extremely difficult. And in particular, these prisons have lots of zombie brutes, which are kind of like the Left 4 Dead tank. Those things are just completely tear you up without a problem. And there's tons of them. That one's extremely hard to do, but it isn't actually impossible. I have done it before. Helicopter crash is a pretty good start. It can be a little random. It randomly picks like what parts of your body to take damage from the crash. And sometimes it might just completely bleed out just at the start of the game, and there's nothing you can do about it because you don't start with any bandages. You might be able to rip up a shirt and then patch yourself up, but that's also just a random luck roll of being able to actually successfully rip the shirt up into a bandage. This one could go very poorly, but if you do survive the crash, it's actually a very great start because it gives you 5 points. It starts you as a National Guard class, which is very strong. Actually, I think the National Guard is not as strong as it was. Yeah, National Guard, you don't even start with a gun anymore, so you'll probably want to bump it up to Military Recruit, which will give you a great backpack, an armored vest, armored boots, army helmets. It's a very, very strong start. It's only 1 point too, and you're already getting the extra points for the scenario. So it's actually a very good start option. If you're a new player, I'd still say do Evacuee first, but if you're looking for something a little bit different, Helicopter Crash is a very good start. Infected, this is the same deal as Very Bad Day, except other problems aren't going on as well. It's just the infection. Again, finding antibiotics is pretty much impossible. Prison is going to be a lot like the island prison. I think, honestly, I think the island prison would be easier to escape from than the regular prison. Because with the island prison, once you get into the water, it's hard for these creatures to actually follow you through the water. Whereas the regular prison, they're just going to keep chasing you. Ambush is going to be very similar to Evacuee starts. You can start in the evac shelter. It also allows you to pick some other options. What happens is your base is surrounded by zombies at the start. I think specifically, now it could be different now because they're always updating this game. It updates like every single day. It used to be that only the evac shelters would be surrounded by zombies if you picked zombies nearby. So if you picked some other location outside of town, you might not actually be surrounded. And it might just be the evac shelters that are all surrounded by zombies. But it does make it so every single shelter in the game is surrounded by zombies. So if you ever want to go into an evac shelter, you're going to have to fight your way through. And they can be more advanced zombies too, instead of just regular ones. Also limits you from not having an NPC start, and it starts in winter. And winter isn't that bad of a problem. You'd think like the temperature would be bad, but it's really not that much colder than early spring. The real problem with winter is the in-game time has been turned forward. So if you start in winter, all the fresh food in the game is rotten. And also the internal timer of the game that follows zombie evolution, which makes zombies harder the more further you go into the game, that will be cranked forward as well. There'll be tougher zombies existing in the world. Which brings us to Sheltered, which is similar to the same thing. It gets rid of the being surrounded by zombies part about it, but you can pick all these really good enclosed shelters. And another thing you can do is if you want to look at these different locations and see what options you have, you can select the scenario here, And then you can tab over to the last tab, description. Down here you'll see select the starting location with backslash or forward slash. I honestly don't know the difference. I apologize. This one will allow you to pick 3 different types of evac shelters. I'm not sure there's any advantage to any of these. All 3 of them have been updated, so they're all pretty interesting now. And then there's also the Lmoe Shelter. And the Lmoe Shelter is very nice because it has all you need for like long-term survival. There'll be like a wood furnace in there, which will allow you to cook food, allow you to read things in the light. It's just a very great start. There's also a water source in there, and the water source is infinite, so you can clean water. There's usually a bed in there too. There's usually some tools and stuff in there. The only problem with the Lmoe Shelter is underground, and that means that you cannot drag a shopping cart down there with you. And as you're playing Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead, you'll find that having a shopping cart is extremely valuable for moving lots of things around. So it's just another step of like unloading that you have to do if you're going to do this. And for me, it's kind of too annoying to be worth it. I'd rather just stay on the top level and be able to use my shopping cart. Large building. As we talked about before, any large building start is going to be pretty dangerous. This allows you all the different types of professions though. And you can pick which kind of large building you want. It also says zombies nearby. So this could also be another one. Again, I think anything that says zombies nearby is going to make it so all evac shelters have zombies near them. They could have fixed it, but the last time I played, all evac shelters have zombies near them if it says that. Halls, malls, and apartment buildings. Apartment building might be the easiest one to get through. It actually says you're on the roof. You might even be able to climb off the building, because I can't recommend doing it. But yeah, definitely, malls are like super, super big, so definitely you're going to die if you do that. Hospital will be slightly easier than the mall, but it'd still be very, very difficult. So Surrounded is very similar to Ambush, except it just allows you to pick in-town locations instead of out-of-town locations. I don't think there's any other difference here. It's not at winter either. Burning Building is also a very great one for newer players, because this gives you 2 points, and the only thing that's going on is there's a fire nearby, and you have to start in town. But if you're stuck with picking one that's a start in town start, you can pick like a house, because houses are usually on the edges of town in this game. So just being in a burning house, you might be able to get out of the town fairly easily. It's possible you'll start in the middle of town though, because it's just random where you'll start. Grocery stores can also be closer to the edge of town. There's even golf courses here. Golf courses, I think, would be a very good bet if you want to make sure you start outside of town. And then a lot of these other ones are just very deep in town, so you're not going to want to pick those up. Squatter is a new one that I haven't personally played. It starts you in the evac shelter. It looks like the only difference here is that, so it probably means all the windows are bashed out. It might mean that all the food and water is gone. But as I said before, the evac shelter used to start with no food and water in it. Mist is just, you start in town and nothing else is going on. So this one is just going to be harder because the Evacuee is probably easier. It's just another different option you can do if you just want to start in a different location. That's what you want to pick. The next summer, as we've talked about with starting in winter, what this means is time has moved forward. The zombies will be more difficult, and there will be all the fresh food and stuff will be rotted. And it also says you can't start with an NPC. The Mascot Rises is more of a goofy kind of game. You start in the food place break room of just some random location, but it starts you with a limited profession list. It says survivor here, but I think, there we go, true food person. It gives you a fanny pack. I don't know what the hard chest guards and stuff are. Baseball bat, what the heck? Some might think food person is just a mascot, but you know better. The mask is getting on your face. You are real. The only thing standing you between this world and oblivion is you. So yeah, this is it's just a joke. It's kind of funny though. So he's like kind of like a superhero persona, I guess. Wilderness just starts you out in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of like the churl start that we looked at earlier. Yeah, medieval peasant. It's basically like that, except it's not going to limit you to medieval classes. Crazy Party is a new one. I haven't done this one, so I can't really tell you how difficult the private resort is. But it starts you as a lost submissive, which I think it puts you in... it puts you in a rubber suit. But there are some other options here, but they're all very expensive. Unless you're willing to pay the iron price for those, this is probably a very difficult start. Safe Place is also a new one. Safe building some distance from the living dead. So let's take a look at what options are available here. Refugee Center, that's the evac shelter. Cabin in the Woods, Lmoe Shelter we talked about. Hermit Check's kind of a newer one too. It's a fine little building. Farms are everywhere in the game, but they're usually pretty safe as well. Horse ranches are actually going to have horses there, which I think there's some way to ride them, but I haven't been able to figure it out myself. Lake Cabin's probably going to be a lot like the other cabin. Lighthouse Island. Might be kind of interesting. I've never seen that before. So this is an easier start for sure, but it does cost you a point to pick it. Bottom of the mine costs a point, so you think it'd be better for some reason, but that's another situation where this is actually a very difficult start. There's some very horrible monsters that are inside of mines. Mines are usually also radioactive in this game. I think the only reason it costs you a point is because there's often like a very high level piece of loot inside these mines, like a rocket launcher or power armor. So I think that's the price that you're paying to try to have the chance of getting that. Experiment, it's going to let you start as cyborgs or mutants again, and it's going to start you in the wilderness start like the other wilderness starts. Otherwise, nothing else is very different, but costs lots of money. And if you pick the experiment professions, it's actually going to cost you even more points. Last delivery is a new one. This is another goofy one, I think. It's just going to start you at some stop on the road. This will start you in a gas station. It's actually going to give you a food truck, which might be interesting. If it's in good condition, then the food truck would actually be very useful. Vehicles are really good in this game. There's lots of customization and stuff you can do. Lots of things you can do with them. They count kind of like as indoors and make yourself a mobile base, basically. It's definitely a good start, but it does cost you 2 points. Helicopter pilot is another new one. Apparently this starts you with a freaking helicopter that's out of fuel and it lands you on a bridge in the middle of nowhere. Obviously it's going to cost you a lot of points. It costs 2 points to pick this, and then it's going to cost 4 points to be the helicopter pilot. Yeah, so, and it limits you to that choice. So after you do that, you're only going to have 2 points left if you're doing the regular point pool. So that's not going to give you very many options. High-tech low life, this is going to let you start as a failed cyborg, which is going to have random augmentations attached to them. Costs a fair bit of points. It's going to start you in a shady basement somewhere. It's probably just going to be in a house. And Overrun is also new. So this one starts you in a military base that's getting overrun by the dead. I'm guessing it's going to be pretty difficult. It's going to allow you to pick lots of military classes though. And again, the more you pay, the better character you can be. But I would say this is probably also going to be fairly difficult unless you start with a gun. And even with a gun, run out of ammo trying to kill all the zombies. So yeah, that's the end of my list here. They're explaining all these scenario starts. Again, if you're a new player, I'd start with Evacuee. If you're looking for something a little bit more challenging that gives you some extra points to play with, I'd pick Burning Building, and then possibly follow that up with a Helicopter Crash. After that, things get a lot more difficult. Sheltered is another good one that gives you more points. It does have the winter start, so you have to be aware that there's going to be stronger zombies out there, but this is another safe start that's fairly normal. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, remember hit the like button, keep the conversation going in the comments, and subscribe if you want to see more. We'll be trying to release as many of these tip videos as I can, and I hope you have a good day.